All right, everybody, welcome back to the world's worst fishing. Happy springtime, and y'all know what that means. It's time to go fishing again. So I'm getting the nitro ready. My buddy Happy Jack, Avery, Simple Jack as we sometimes call him, he's going to be running my boat this year for Tallahassee's biggest annual tournament called the Talquin Open. Lake Talquin is a reservoir here in Tallahassee. Kind of getting the boat ready for him. So hopefully he'll catch some fish, and if he does, I will update you guys in the next video. It's just good to see the boat out from under the cover. We really got to get her in the water soon on the channel. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the world's worst fishing. I'm your host, Chris Jones, and thanks for being here today to watch us play with glitter in our garage. So today's video is going to be all about soft plastic bait recipes, kind of how to do it, some philosophy on it, right? And I'm going to show you a very exciting new tool, a brand new website developed specifically to be a community for soft plastic bait makers to share recipes, and it will serve as sort of a database for soft plastic bait makers, and I think it's going to expand even beyond that as a whole new resource website as well. But today, recipes, right? How do you get to this? Well, you gotta have a recipe, right? So that's what we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at some common recipes, sort of what I think is the best way to log in your recipes, and then we're also gonna have some fun with it along the way. So let's get started. First up, green pumpkin. Okay, you're a new bait maker who has picked up the hobby and you wanna make your favorite colors and the staple colors, right? Ask any professional angler or take a poll of professional anglers. What are the 3 colors you must have in your tackle box in terms of soft plastic baits? You're going to see green pumpkin, some sort of version of black and blue, and white pearl to cover shads, right? Green pumpkin is fairly simple. Most of the time, you can get away with just one pigment straight out of the bottle, right? So for example, I like Dead on Plastics melons, or if you don't have this and you have Lure Works Green Pumpkin 109, which I normally would have an example in hand, I'm out of it actually. You can go straight out of the bottle and get a great green pumpkin. So really the question becomes, how much of it, right? And so the first thing that you want to remember when creating a recipe is to have a control. And what I mean by control is you need to measure out the same amount of plastic each time. And this might seem really obvious and really basic, but it is very important if you want consistency over time. I always like to build recipes at the 1 cup level, because if it's a dud, you're not going to waste too much plastic. However, there's really not a whole lot of value that you can get out of only doing a 1/2 cup. A 1/2 cup is just not enough to really even work with. However, you don't necessarily want to use the 2 cup size either, because now you're burning through a lot of material. The 1 cup control size works really well. It's enough plastic volume to get a few different molds out of it, because not every recipe looks as great in one mold, depending on the size and shape, right? I don't know why I put my hands out, but like depending on the size and the shape of the bait cavity, 30 drops in your green pumpkin may look excellent in a thin bait, in a thick bait, but in a thin bait, maybe the color looks a little too undersaturated, right? So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but always have a control and always be very consistent. All right, let me show you a nice, easy green pumpkin. 1 cup of plastic, 30 drops. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 30. Okay. So, rule number 1 when building a recipe or just learning to build recipes is make sure it is a easily replicated process, right? A recipe does you no good if the manner in which it was built cannot be duplicated consistently. Okay, and that kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. Have a control. However, right, you need consistent drops. Part of that is shaking your pigments. Okay, you really have to shake a pigment really well, especially a morph pigment, before you start dumping things into plastic. You also need a measuring tool that is consistent. Okay, this right here is a little quarter teaspoon measuring spoon. Okay, and what this allows me to do is measure out flake very precisely. I see sometimes people just get some flake with their fingers and just, you know, sprinkle it in or dump it in. I see people just dump it in straight from the jar. Now, that's all fine and dandy if you're just having fun building colors, but if you're trying to build a catalog and maintain consistency, it has to be a process that can be replicated. So, we can very precisely measure out a quarter of a teaspoon, right? What you don't want to do is start dividing this up, right, to where, you know, oh yeah, I only want to measure out about half of this spoon. Yeah, you can do that, but it's going to be inconsistent, right? One of the things I always joke about on my channel is, okay, we're going to add a smidge of flake, a smidge of this. That's all fine. It works great. I've made a lot of beautiful baits that way, but it's not duplicable. Okay, let's go ahead and run some of this green pumpkin because I just want to see it, all right? This is the basic of the basic green pumpkin. Okay, first mold down. Hopefully I have enough to get all 3 of these molds. We should. Ooh, you know what? We might not. I don't think we do. Jeez Louise. Okay. So we'll open up green pumpkin mold number 1. Oh yeah. The Vexus creature. That's pretty. Look at that. Doesn't that melons make a nice green pumpkin? It's got the brown that you want in green pumpkin, but also really green in those extremities. Absolutely fantastic mold for green pumpkin. All right, mold number 2. Regular stickworm. Yep, purdy. And bonus mold, we did a few with the new Kraken. So we'll get those off and show them to you. Yeah, there it is. Green pumpkin and the new Kraken squid crawfish thingy. So we have several different examples now of green pumpkin. Well, several different molds in green pumpkin, all looking really good. However, I want to touch on something real fast, okay? Look at how the green pumpkin is displayed in the baits that have the thin extremities, right? It's just overall a little bit brighter as opposed to over here. Let me get these. Okay? Overall, just darker. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Different baits that have different shapes and sizes are going to display color a little bit different. So I would actually probably lighten this recipe up if I knew I'm only shooting Cincos in it, okay? Maybe, so this was 30 drops for 1 cup. Maybe we'll go down to 20 or 22, right? Maybe 25 at the most, to brighten this up a little bit so that it's not quite so oversaturated. So that's just, you know, getting real nitty gritty. However, the reason I shot such different molds is to show you that not necessarily does one recipe always give you the best look mold to mold to mold to mold. Sometimes you actually will tailor a recipe for what mold you are using. All right, let's do a quick little recap on our rules, and then I'm going to show you the new website resource, and then we're going to move on to one last recipe, okay? That's going to be a little bit more complicated. So, rule number 1, obviously, was have a control, okay? And if I get the rule numbers mixed up, who cares? But the point is, use a control, okay, right? That control, 1 cup plastisol, okay, all right? And then you can see how we've written this out. I know that this recipe right here is at the 1 cup measuring size, all right? 30 drops of DOP melons. Now, you know, you can always tailor this a little bit more, okay? One thing that really makes a green pumpkin great is to add like a drop or 2 of red, all right? 1/4 teaspoon of the 0.035 square cut black flake, all right? That's what I like for my basic green pumpkin. However, like we just discussed, if this is green pumpkin for Cinco's, I want maybe a little bit less saturation. I want 20 drops, 22 drops, right? Whatever you come up with, all right? And so that kind of goes into rule number 2. Make sure that your process can be duplicated, okay? Don't just sprinkle the powder on. Don't just squeeze the color and time it. You know, like, oh yeah, I need to squeeze the color bottle for 5 seconds. Nope, that's going to be very inconsistent. If you're not scooping the glitter into duplicable, measurable sizes, right, using those little spoons, you're going to be very inconsistent. Don't sprinkle the glitter. Don't just dump it out of the cup. All of that works, but not when you're trying to build a recipe database for yourself. So use a control. Make sure your process is easily duplicated. Keep it simple, that way you can duplicate this. And then rule number 3, okay? Don't stop experimenting. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to abandon a working recipe for maybe something better. And then you always want to expand on a recipe, okay? And that goes back to sort of the first tenet of rule number 3, which is don't stop experimenting. Just because you got a really great green pumpkin or a really great watermelon red or a really great black and blue laminate, that doesn't mean you always make it like that exactly for the rest of your bait making life. Always expand on it. And that kind of leads me into my personal philosophy on recipes, which I'm a little unorthodox. I don't keep recipes. I don't write them down. I literally don't have a recipe logbook. I have a few up here, you know, just some of my swim bait patterns that I duplicate a lot. But I've gotten to the point to where I like to create, you know, like every time I come out here is an opportunity for really new recipe creation. Even if I don't write it down, I get to have fun with color building. And color building is what I kind of choose to do rather than follow my own previous recipe book. The only danger to logging recipes is the tendency to only stick to what you've done before and miss out on what you could create new. So every time I step into the shop, I kind of, you know, use it as maybe an example to do something new, to create. And some things are complicated and there really can be no recipe for it. But that keeps your creative juices flowing, and ultimately you kind of need both, okay? Because the only way you're ever going to develop better recipes is by trying new things. So the recipes that you do develop that you like, follow the rules, keep a good, accurate recipe log, make sure the recipes are easily duplicated, but also dedicate time in your shop to experimenting, to expanding. That's how you become a better bait maker, and that's how you develop new and better recipes. Okay, so real quick, we're back with the green pumpkin, and the easiest way to expand and experiment with a base color is to just add a different flake to it. Add another flake. Right now we have 2 flakes. Okay, so we have our black flake in there, and now we're going to put some blue hologram flake in it. Alright, it's dead on water. It is like a hologram blue. Okay, and just like that, we've gone from traditional green pumpkin to pumpkin blue. Notice how that blue flake, okay, and this is what's fascinating about how colors play on each other. Just adding that blue flake, to me, to my eye, makes this whole color look greener. Isn't that something? See how much more brown it looks? Now it looks a little different, right? Looks a little brighter green, more watermelon green, and this one is more brown, okay? So, you know, just fun ways that you can alter a color and experiment and change the whole look of something just by adding one different flake, one different color flake to it. And this is what's so much fun about building recipes, is that you'll notice these little changes. And lo and behold, we went from a brown-green pumpkin almost to a watermelon. All right, this is going to be somewhat of a rudimentary, low-tech run-through of this website. We're not going to, you know, hop on streaming software and share the whole screen, but we can go through it pretty simply here. ColorForBaits.com. Let's open it up. All right, this is going to be essentially a totally separate social media app for soft plastic bait making recipes. So ColorForBaits is sort of a community website, right? And you can see I've put a few things on here, right? I call this one Dopamine Blue. It's my favorite way to use the dead-on dopamine pigment. Okay, all right. So you can see here's Dopamine Blue, 35 drops. Okay, and so if you click the buy link, it just kind of takes you to this color, right? Color morphs dopamine. There's my recipe with it, a link to the actual dead-on website. So yeah, right, there's my flake. So my dopamine has 35 drops, dopamine 2 drops, Dye of the Dead Blue. Okay, and someone left a comment, right? So it is sort of a community social media app for it. Okay, so here's another bait maker right here, Only Fins. Yep, I've seen a lot of his work. Okay, there's his watermelon red. We can go to his page. Yeah, there we go. Right, so you have like your own profile. Here's a list of some of his recipes. A very nice, looks like a painted perch pattern there in the 6-inch swim bait mold. Okay, we can look at a lot of his recipes here. Really fun stuff, right? And this gentleman actually linked his website. Okay, so you can actually link your store. Okay, and now we are over here at his actual shop. So really cool there. You can kind of set up your own profile. You can link your store with it, whatever you want to do. Really cool there. All right, so we'll just go back, and I haven't put a ton of stuff on here, right? So you can see you have, you know, your own dashboard. Your inventory is really cool. Basically, whenever you create a new recipe, right, you give it a name, a description, you upload your photo, and then you go, well, it's not going to let me do it, but then you go through and you basically list, you choose your inventory. So what molds you have, what colors you have, powders, flakes, and that way whoever clicks on your recipe now sees the formula items. At least that's my that's my thoughts on that. So really fun there. You can go to my page real quick. I haven't done a ton. I'm just kind of getting started with this website. So yeah, just a fun little resource website there. ColorForBaits. Definitely check it out. And yeah, I think I'm going to be putting a lot of stuff on here. And eventually, I think it's going to morph into just an overall resource website. It won't just be a database, right, for recipes. I think it will have probably some pages, hopefully in the future. I'm spitballing here. But maybe some resource pages with links to some videos from some other content creators, and hopefully myself, to just sort of turn this into a nice resource page, not just a recipe book. However, today's video being about recipes, this is going to be a fun little tool where bait makers willingly share recipes rather than people begging for recipes on the Facebook groups, which you should not do. All right, and now we're going to do a brand new recipe. I've never done this color this way before. Let's do a fresh take on black with blue flake laminate. Okay, so most people would put black color in, and blue color in. But maybe we want a little bit of a fresh take on it, something new. So here we go. Let's build a recipe that I've never done together. So you want to start slow, okay? Because laminates are all about getting saturations to be fairly equal on both sides so that one color does not overpower the other, all right? So let's maybe start with 20 drops of black. Actually, let's start with 15. Here we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, because you got to remember, black is always the dominant color whenever you are laminating black with another color, okay? Yeah, that looks good. All right, so for the blue side, instead of adding blue, we're gonna add nothing but blue flake. We're gonna blue flake it to death, essentially. All right, so we've got the larger size, okay, the ½ teaspoon. Okay, so if we do 2 of those, we know that we have a full teaspoon. All right, that is something that we can measure, remember, and duplicate. But I have a feeling we're gonna need more. Yep, we're gonna want more. We want this to be Blue Flake City. All right. So let's maybe even double that, okay? 2 full teaspoons worth of just blue flake. Whenever I'm building a recipe, particularly a laminate, I do what's called the drizzle test. That's where I drizzle out a little bit of each side here on my mat to just make sure that I like the way the 2 colors interact with each other. It's sort of a little cheat code to see if your laminate is gonna laminate, to see if it's laminating the way you want. Yeah. All right, so as we can see, the blue holds its own. We actually do see it interacting with the black fairly strongly, okay? But maybe a little bit more blue flake. Let's go ahead and add 1 more full teaspoon for 3 teaspoons worth. All right, and now we have a working recipe, right? Something very simple that I can now easily change or duplicate. Let's say my black wasn't quite strong enough. Okay, now I know I had 15 drops. We'll bump that up to 20, etc., right? So easily rememberable and can be duplicated or altered easily. Yeah, check it out. And just like that, I have a new black with blue flake laminate that I have never made. I've been making baits since, I believe it was September of 2012. I have never done black with blue flake like this, right? So just kind of goes to show you've never made every recipe, no matter how long you've been doing this. Just the same way no one guitar player has ever played every single riff or lick or chord that is possible on the instrument. You will never make every single bait color. All right, and there are those other 2 molds. All right, here's one you haven't seen in a while. That's the old punch crawl AI punch bug in our brand new black with blue flake recipe. Very simple. Here's a little brush hog style, the crazy hog. Just like that. A brand new recipe. I know I keep saying that, but that's how fun it is and how easy it is to do something new every time. And then you can build a new recipe from there. All right, everybody, that's gonna wrap this video up. Again, this is very basic stuff, but it is important to touch on. A lot of people are always asking about recipes, whether they're asking another bait maker for a recipe, which, yeah, I have some feelings about that. You know, here's my argument there. In the bait groups, there is a reasonable expectation that people are willing to share recipes because those are informational groups. So it is common for people to make posts saying what they used, how they made it, maybe what pigment they used. However, if that information is not already willingly in the post, that bait maker probably doesn't want to share their exact recipe. So that's just something to sort of a rule of thumb. So on one hand, there's a reasonable expectation for people to share information on the information groups. However, there again, no bait maker has a duty to cough up a recipe that they may have worked hard to develop. So if it's not already in the post, maybe we can break the trend of begging for recipes. You know, any recipes that people want to share, they're going to share, right? Just like ColorForBaits.com. Definitely go check out that website. There's going to be a lot of recipes start popping up on there, hopefully, and that can sort of be another resource. Follow good recipe process, I guess, is sort of the moral of the story for today's video. However, don't become dependent on recipes, okay? Never forget that good recipes come from experimentation and color building. So you have to do both. Okay, see you guys later.